And let's begin now with officially opening up the session with a land acknowledgement. So we are aware that people are joining us from all across Ontario and beyond. And so I invite you to reflect and share the land acknowledgement of the places that you're joining us from. We'll share a link that will help you to do that in the chat. But for the purpose of the land acknowledgement that's going to be read today, this is grounded at York University, which is the headquarters for YouthREX. So YouthREX's provincial office is located at York University, and both YouthREX and York University acknowledge their presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tikaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Métis, and is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and this territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And now I want to introduce our Director of Knowledge Exchange, Katie Rogers, who's going to provide us with some brief information about YouthREX and our partners today, and outline a little bit about the agenda as well.
Thank you, Cyril. Again, welcome everyone. As you may know, January is National Mentoring Month. And so we are really excited to end this month with this event on critical youth mentorship. YouthREX, or Youth Research and Evaluation Exchange, is presenting today's event in partnership with Mentor Canada, and also in partnership with the York Research Chair in Youth and Context of Inequity, which is held by Dr. Uzo Anucha, Associate Professor in the School of Social Work at York University and Provincial Academic Director of YouthREX. Although Dr. Anucha is unavoidably absent today, she does send her greetings and she wishes everyone a really great learning event. And what we're hoping for today is really creating space to engage voices from research, from practice, and lived experience in critical conversations to explore inclusive, equitable, and meaningful approaches to youth mentorship. We want to work together to expand our understandings of youth mentorship in ways that center the strengths and voices of young people, that promote intergenerational and multi-directional learning, and that advance social justice. And we know that these conversations are critical now more than ever. So a brief look at the agenda for today. Part 1 and Part 2 will feature keynote presentations. We will have spoken word performances, and we will spotlight critical mentorship practices from youth programs across Ontario. We do have a health and wellness break scheduled. We encourage folks to take breaks as they need. And we realize that you're very busy, so you may have to leave and come back, and we encourage you to do so. We will be here until 3:30. Of course, this is a live event. Anything can happen, so we appreciate in advance your patience and flexibility. And we do encourage you to stay for a wellness session on tools for care that is going to be facilitated by movement and meditation teacher Renelyn Quinicot. So we offer that to you, and we look forward to sharing space with you today. We appreciate your time. As Cyril mentioned, this event is being recorded, but comments from participants will not be shared, and we will have edited recordings of this event available online on YouthREX's Knowledge Hub, along with the slides and any resources shared by our presenters. And of course, because we are offering French translation for our keynote presentations, those recordings will also be available as well. I want to briefly mention that we have a graphic facilitator joining us today, Lisa Sorsa, who you can find in the participants list. And Lisa will be creating visual notes of our keynote presentations that we will take a look at before we move into our Q&A. If you have questions for Jean or for Larissa this afternoon, please feel free to share those in the chat box. We will have 10 or 15 minutes to engage after the presentations with questions, and we will be able to see those visual notes. Of course, we recommend that you share your experiences on Twitter. You can find YouthREX at Rex for Youth. You can find Mentor Canada at Mentoring Canada, and you can use the hashtags critical mentorship and mentoring month. And for those of you who are new to YouthREX, I just want to give you a brief overview of the services and supports that we offer. Our vision is an Ontario where shared knowledge is transformed into positive impact for all youth. And our mission is to make research evidence and evaluation accessible and relevant to Ontario's youth sector. We do this through knowledge exchange, which includes events like the one we're hosting today. We do that through YouthREX Ed or Learn, where we offer professional development and capacity building opportunities to the sector. And we have youth program support. So we can support you in designing, developing, or evaluating your program. And we encourage you to get in touch with us to talk about how our services and supports can enhance your work with youth. I will also mention that we have a featured collection on mentorship right now on our Knowledge Hub, which is our online library. We have over 1,700 resources that connect shared knowledge to youth work practice. We encourage you to visit that space. And I also will encourage you, as I said, to reach us by email at info@youthrex.com if you want to talk more about how we might support you. And I just want to take this moment as well to introduce you to Mentor Canada. My colleague, Veronique Church-Duplessis, is joining us today. She is the Director of Research and Evaluation and will be sharing some remarks with you later. But Mentor Canada is a coalition of organizations that provide youth mentoring. Their goal is to build sector capacity to expand access to mentoring across Canada. Their work is focused on research, technology, public education, and the development of regional networks. And Mentor Canada was launched in 2019 by Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada, the Alberta Mentoring Partnership, and the Ontario Mentoring Coalition. Working together, we will build sector capacity to empower every young person to fulfill their potential, which is a great segue in today's presentation. If you have critical mentorship practices that you would like to share, please feel free to do so. We have a space on our website, a community of practice called Rex Virtual Cafe, and we have a dedicated conversation to allow folks to share. If you're not able to share in this space today, please head to that community of practice and share with us. Thank you so much again for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Cyril.
Thanks so much, Katie. I encourage everyone to take part in the virtual cafe. It's a wonderful space to continue conversations. So it's great to come together in spaces like this, but also to be able to carry those across and developing those networks. As the Director of Learning and Development, I'm really excited about the dynamic free learning opportunities that YouthREX provides, especially one of our later certificates, which is the Centering Black Youth Wellbeing Certificate, which registration actually closes today. So if you do have interest and time, please make sure to visit learn.youthrex.com, head over and register. We have the French version as well. The entire certificate is available in French. And that is going to be concluding registration on the 6th of February. So please, if that's of interest, definitely take part. I'm so excited about our upcoming guest speaker, Dr. Jean Rhodes. Just before we welcome Dr. Jean Rhodes on, I'm going to read a very brief bio that just captures a small amount of the wonderful work that this scholar has added. So Dr. Jean Rhodes is a Frank L. Boyden Professor of Psychology and the Director of the Center of Evidence-Based Mentoring at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She has devoted her career to understanding and advancing the role of intergenerational relationships in the intellectual, social, emotional, educational, and career development of marginalized youth. She's published 3 books, edited 4 volumes, and has over 150 chapters and peer-reviewed articles on topics related to positive youth development, the transition to adulthood, and mentoring. And her latest book is entitled Older and Wiser: New Ideas for Youth Mentoring in the 21st Century, published by Harvard University Press. Jean is a prolific scholar and an award-winning scholar at that, completing her PhD in clinical and community psychology at DePaul University and her clinical internship at the University of Chicago Medical School. So please join me in welcoming Professor Jean Rhodes.
Thank you very much. I am going to share my screen and we'll get started. So let's see. Yes. Okay. First, I want to, thank YouthREX and Mentor Canada and York University, and particularly Kathy, for this wonderful invitation. It's really an honor to speak with you. I was visiting your website this week, and I'm just so impressed with all of the resources that you have put out there to help advance mentoring and advance youth work. It's just overwhelming and really, really impressive. Today, I'm going to reflect on 30 years of research. And I'm going to, in kind of the keeping of the theme of this, be critical of mentoring. So it's a little different from critical mentoring, but I'm critical of mentoring. And at the same time, I'm trying to offer hope and suggestions for how we can improve the capacity of youth workers and others to really raise the bar and make mentoring more effective than it currently is. So before I even get started, I have to thank my team because as, we were talking about, I've published many, many articles, but none of that happens on its own. It's all part of a team effort with many of my graduate students and postdocs and colleagues like Professor Sarah Schwartz, Professor Elizabeth Raposa, and many others who have helped me on this journey. The journey began many years ago, and in 2002, I wrote a book called Stand By Me, The Risks and Rewards of Mentoring Today's Youth. And I really put out a model of mentoring that was centered around how important that one relationship was, and that was really the sine qua non. Without that, there was nothing else, and therefore it wasn't really useful to focus on anything else. And I held that perspective for many, many years. And so in some ways, as I've gotten older and wiser in my career, I've been willing to look at the data and challenge my own assumptions and really own that on some things that I put in that book might not have been right. And so I recently wrote a book called Older and Wiser, and it's got, a double meaning because I'm older and wiser, and I think mentors are as well. And what I try to do, and this is a book that you can get on Amazon, is put out new ideas for youth mentoring. So it's hard for me to present 30 years of research in the next 40 minutes. I won't even try, but a lot of that is in this book. And also, you can find a lot of the articles that I talk about on the Rhodes Lab website. If you're not familiar, you should subscribe to the Chronicle of Evidence-Based Mentoring, and it's free. I've been doing it since 2012. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed journal articles and summaries of research going all the way back to really decades. And you can just search right here and it'll give you, everything we've ever summarized about, say, youth in the foster care system, or various groups or types of mentoring. There's also forums and profiles of up and coming mentoring researchers. So I encourage you to join that if you haven't already. But my big question is, how effective is mentoring? And I know that seems like a funny question to ask, but it's really unclear to me. And so when I set off to write the book, Older and Wiser, I actually thought it would be easy. And it wasn't. It was incredibly difficult because it really was challenging my assumptions. As soon as I tried to answer that question, I ran up against lots of challenges to my own mindset. And the first thing I did is I looked at what are called meta-analyses. Now, a meta-analysis is when you take all the studies related to a particular topic, all the evaluations. And in this case, it was evaluations of youth mentoring programs from all around the world, mostly the US, but lots of programs in Canada as well. And looked at what's called the effect size, and that's basically the magnitude of impact. It's the difference between the treatment group and the control group. And what you want is a large impact. And you can do this for any intervention, but we've been doing it for mentoring since 2002. And so this is what I did to start writing the book Older and Wiser, is I plotted the effect size that were reported in every meta-analysis of youth mentoring programs, going all the way back to David Dubois' first one in 2002, and all the way up to one that I was the senior author on in 2019. And I want you to reflect on what this trend line is showing you. First of all, it's showing you that the effects of mentoring are relatively small, right? And what's discouraging to me as a researcher, and I'm sure to you, is that despite lots of investment in mentoring programs, despite lots and lots of academic articles that have continuously gone up since the field was beginning, we are not really improving the effect size of youth mentoring. And that was an alarming, like an alarm bell went off. And so for a lot of the time I was writing the book, I was trying to figure out why. Because once we understand why we're not moving that needle, why there isn't a direct correlation between research evidence and effects, we can begin to solve that problem. And I should say that other fields, you see a much more promising trajectory. You see it start small, and then over time, as evidence accumulates, it gets better. Certainly, I'm a clinical psychologist, and certainly in my field, what the outcomes for child and adolescent therapy that started, years ago have gone way up as we've embraced cognitive behavioral and other evidence-based approaches. And so mentoring needs to kind of bring itself up to date, figure out how to be more effective. The next thing I did is I remember the effect sizes. If we go back to this, I want you to keep these benchmarks in mind. Just about around 0.20 is considered a small effect. Somewhere in the kind of 0.4 range is considered a medium effect. And then when you get up around 0.7, you've got a large effect, okay? So what I tried to do is I said, well, let's look at the most common, most popular approaches to youth mentoring out there and see what those effects are. And here we see, these are published effect sizes. You know, I didn't calculate them, I just aggregated them. And you see that the effect sizes for some of our most beloved, trusted mentoring programs are actually closer to 0 than to the 0.20 that was reported. So they're actually bringing down the average. And these are very low effects. These are effects that if it was a clinical trial of a new pharmaceutical, you would say, okay, this isn't working well, let's figure out how to improve it. These are not effects where you say, oh, great, let's keep doing exactly what we're doing. So that's why I said this is a critical mentoring talk. I'm critical of the way we're doing things because we need to get those effects up. We also know from a cost benefit analysis that a lot of our most cherished programs are actually providing a negative return on investment. So again, this is a wake-up call. This is not my data. This is just me presenting data and saying, let's roll up our sleeves and improve youth mentoring. Because the great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. And in this case, here's what I would argue. I would argue the myth is that if you just put two people together and you encourage them to form a friendship, that will solve problems and the challenges facing today's youth. We all know that there is a mental health crisis facing today's youth, particularly in the aftermath of the global pandemic. We know that many youth are dealing with trauma, with the trauma of racial discrimination, of violence. We know that many are having learning problems. And to think that just a friendship alone can solve that, it's just not enough. And maybe that we shouldn't be trying to solve those problems, but I can tell you that parents are looking to mentoring programs to help solve those problems. So the first thing, I have a chapter in my book called How Did We Get It So Wrong for So Long? And believe me, the book gets happier after that. That was kind of me just trying to figure it out. And I believe that one of the reasons that youth mentoring kind of hasn't achieved what I believe, and I've committed my career to, more than half my life to, the promise of mentoring, is because we've systematically underestimated risk factors and really thought of mentoring more as a protective factor. And part of that has to do with the fact that youth mentoring, the second wave of youth mentoring, emerged during a movement in psychology around positive youth development and resilience and assets and really building on kids' strengths. And that's great. However, young people also have challenges, and we haven't been serious about how mentoring programs can address those challenges. Okay, so how do I know that young people who are referred to mentoring programs have challenges? Well, there was a study by Roger DeJora and others where they looked at 30 mentoring programs that they considered sort of business as usual, just average mentoring programs in the US. It was paid for by the federal government. It was over 2,000 kids. So this is a great snapshot that was done in 2018 of youth mentoring. And when the youth signed up for the mentoring program, they filled out questionnaires, and their families did, about challenges. And what I saw when I began to graph the data from Roger's report was that the youth who are referred to mentoring programs are at roughly double the risk of average American young people. Okay. These American averages come from, national large data sets, the CDC, other places, and you compare that to the data that was in Roger's report, and you see that the young people's mental health challenges are over 40% and roughly double those overall, which are already quite high, and that the young people are much more likely to live in extreme poverty, to suffer from attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders, to have parents who are incarcerated, all sorts of struggles. And these are only some of them. That's what I fit onto one slide, but across the board, the young people who are being referred to our mentoring programs are being referred often in response to a challenge that they have. This is a report that came out of Canada, a study with researchers where they looked at why young people were being referred to Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Canada. And in 25% of the cases, the parents said because they have, an emotional struggle. It was defined in that report as a disability or psychiatric illness as a primary reason. Okay, so that's why they're referring. They're not referring because the young person needs a friend, needs another role model. Not necessarily. They need a role model, but they also need to maybe work on something. And we saw that same trend in my field of clinical psychology, where if you think about like neo-Freudian approaches to therapy, where you just went in and you just kind of talked to your therapist, there was no real goal. And now we've moved much more toward, hey, let's work on something. We only have a limited time. Let's make this count. And that's where mentoring has to go. We have to think of that hour that a stranger is willing to give up in service of a child as a precious, precious thing. We need to get everything we can out of that hour and more. And in order to do that, we need to provide those mentors with evidence-based tools that they can work on with the young person. And kind of begin to think of it less in terms of a friend, because young people already have caring adults in their schools and in their after-school programs, and more as a paraprofessional who can help the young person with the challenge that they're facing. And here we see it. This is a bit of a difficult chart to interpret, so I'll walk you through it. But on the left side, you see that when parents are in the normal range of, when their children are in the normal range of mental health struggles, I'm sorry that we're missing the white parents versus Black parents, but parents are roughly as likely to think that their child needs a mentoring program. But particularly for Black parents, when the mental health struggles get elevated, they're twice as likely as white parents to say, that my child needs to go to a mentoring program because they've got elevated mental health problems. This finding we keep finding over and over again since that study came out, that parents are looking to mentoring programs to help address real struggles that their young people have. And I would argue, based on the data, that we're not delivering yet. But I think we can. In fact, we have everything set up to do it. So don't despair. I think when I say that young people, we've been underestimating the risks, I want you to look, this is put out, by the National Academy of Science, and it's kind of a spectrum of risk of young people, of all people. And that, there are certain programs that everybody should have, like wearing seatbelts or brushing their teeth, and that's, health promotion. But then, and also universal things like kindergarten and preschool. But when the intervention group has higher risk factor, we get further along this continuum, okay? And I would put mentoring as somewhere up here, not as a necessary inoculation for all young people, but as a response to risk. Okay, that's where youth mentoring programs are. And I showed you the data. They are at increased risk for poverty, trauma, loss of loved ones, and they're already showing early symptoms of struggles. They're not where we've kind of put mentoring, which is down here. Okay, so I'm making the case that we're further along this continuum than we acknowledged. And yet we tell mentors that, just be a friend. You don't need any training. You don't need any skills. Just show up. That's all you need to do, and you'll get the child to their goals. I would argue that that message is a recipe for disappointment, both for the mentor and the mentee. And the reason I say for the mentor is because this is work that's come from my great colleague, Renee Spencer, where she's looked at, why do people give up on mentoring? Why do mentors give up? And she had an article called, "It's Not What I Expected." And you can read these, that the mentors are showing up. They're being told, you don't need any skills. It's going to be great, big smiles. And then it's like, whoa, these young people are really struggling. It's much harder than I thought. My expectation was that they would be more appreciative. And I can tell you, I'm speaking from experience because I took a year off being a professor and became a match support specialist at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Boston and Big Sisters of Greater Boston. And oh, I'm sorry. What's happening? And I saw for myself that the young people, that the matches were very difficult to maintain because the people who were volunteering were really struggling with not having sufficient training for the level of risk of the young people that they were meeting up with. And we see this in data as well. Janice Cooper-Schmidt and her team and I did a study where we looked at overall attrition, overall early match, ending across 60,000 matches. This was a database that came out of the National Mentoring Partnership and Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. We looked at how many of those lasted for the full year or had an early match closure, and 38% had an early match closure. But what you see here is that was the average. But as long as there's higher risk of the little or of the mentee, you see that the match closure rate, the early match closure rate goes way up, right? All the way to almost 70% if the young person's engaging in risky health behaviors. So you've got this mismatch. You've got mentors who are being told, it's not that, there is a level of training that we're going to provide, but you're not there to solve problems, and just be a role model, be a friend. And we've got them being paired with people who have serious, young people who have serious challenges, and they are not being provided with the proper tools. I'm not talking about your particular program or any particular program. Remember, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of programs. And so I don't want you to take this personally. Maybe, your program is doing it differently. So I don't want you to mad at me. And so what I would argue, though, is that the models are not always matching the needs of mentees. I think we can agree with that. But this is the turning point of the talk, because I'm going to talk to you about, well, how do we do this? It's a bit of a challenge. How do we provide mentors with the necessary tools to meet the needs of today's mentees? And some of the solution comes from papers that have come out recently. There's a team, Michael Lyons and Sam McQuillan, who've been doing some really great work where they show that the best outcomes are when we balance building strong relationships with having clear goals and imparting skills to achieve those goals. And that, in fact, there's a point of after which there's not larger returns. And what I'm saying is that they said, as long as there's a trusting relationship, it doesn't have to be deeper and deeper. There's no sense that the longer, the stronger, or the deeper, the better the outcomes. As long as it's, they feel like they have a bond and they are working on something, you get better outcomes. And so I thought that was really interesting. And this also fits with some work by Tim Cavell, where he says, we really need to move from thinking about the intervention as a relationship to thinking about the relationship as a context for targeted evidence-based intervention. So I want to make crystal clear that I'm not saying that the relationship is unimportant. Without the relationship, I still agree, you're not going to make much progress. Children are going to vote with their feet. If they don't like their mentor, if they don't feel like the mentor appreciates them and they have some sort of connection, they don't want to work on anything. So the relationship comes first, but the relationship alone is not enough. So it's necessary, absolutely, but it's not sufficient, is what I would argue. So I'm going to return to that graph I showed earlier. Remember that discouraging graph that showed the effects were quite small. And what I had my team of researchers at the center do is find programs that were targeted and evidence-based and look at those effect sizes. And what you see here is quite remarkable, that when a program is targeted to its population and based on evidence, you get effect sizes that are rivaling those of the best psychotherapy, the best interventions out there. And Michael Karcher, who you may have heard of at the University of Texas, San Antonio, he was like off the charts with his Stevens Kids programs, but there's many others. And so that was just eyeballing the data. I was like, wow, we need to go back to that meta-analysis that I did with Liz Raposa. Remember that one that got the effect size around 0.20. And we need to look at a particular factor. If the relationship is targeted and imparts skills, do you get better effects? Okay, Because what this is telling you, if you look at these data overall, is the overall effect of youth mentoring is 0.20. But that average is being brought down by programs that are, I would call, non-specific, friendship-oriented. And the ones that are very targeted are actually producing effects that are stronger. But I would put that to a meta-analysis. So this was an article that came out a couple of years ago, well, about a year ago. And it was non-specific versus targeted approaches to youth mentoring, a follow-up meta-analysis. So this is where we looked at the 70 studies that made it through and were in our original meta-analysis, but we coded them according to their approach. And what you see is that if you, we couldn't even code for evidence-based, but if you're targeted, if you're working on a particular outcome, instead of just working on building a relationship, or if you're sometimes you say, well, I build a relationship, but we work on things. But if you're not doing it in any focused way, like one week you're working on this and the next week you're working on that, that's an intervention that's not being developed, with a lot of fidelity or without a lot of strength. We're talking about ones that have a particular thing they're trying to change and then target that. And what you find is you get double the effects of when you use a targeted approach. And when you look at outcomes that many funders and others care about, you get triple the effects. Okay, so there is a wake-up call for our field there once again, that we need to be thinking about how can we provide targeted care for our young people that is focused on particular challenges or goals that they hold important to them. Now that's a challenge, because as you look back at these programs that were getting these strong effects, they're what I would call boutique programs, like mentoring for youth with psychiatric disorders. That's a particular group, or STEM mentoring for students with disabilities. Well, that's fine if you're a boutique. If the only thing you're selling is shoes, you can go deep into shoes. But what if you are a program like Big Brothers Big Sisters or others, where you welcome any child or many children into your program? The first child may have issues with learning or language, and the next one may have anxiety, and the next one might be depressed or dealing with trauma exposure or something else. How do you provide targeted evidence-based care for all of these people? That's the conundrum. And so this is why I use the superstar target. I think it's possible. I think that everyone walking into a program can get targeted care, but we have to do it mindfully. And that's what I want to talk to you about. How do you open your doors to lots of youth and still are able, with your average volunteer, not with a volunteer who you're paying or who has specialized training, to provide targeted care? Okay. So I sat there as I was writing my book, and I built out this kind of figure for myself. And I say, okay, let's just start with the fact that programs are really good at these things. Mentoring programs are great at screening, recruiting, training mentors, supervising them, working with the parents, working with their caregivers and teachers, assessing them. This is what mentoring programs do. And what's great about it is they're bringing in a lot of volunteers, a lot of less expensive providers than if you're just going to like a mental health center. And that's a movement in our field. It's called task shifting, shifting care from very expensive providers to volunteers and paraprofessionals. Mentor programs are great at that. And it's also, so what I would say is, if you're a small targeted program and you're working, with Indigenous youth on social emotional learning, stick with it, because the data are clear that specialized programs with a targeted audience, the mentor should be delivering that intervention, because typically they are well-trained, they're college students, or they're somebody that's getting some sort of credit. They're basically serving in a paraprofessional role in a specialized way. But most programs aren't like that. Most programs are large and non-specific. So I came up with two possibilities that I think would be, and I'm testing them and I've seen them in practice. One is you embed mentors in systems that are already providing targeted interventions, like schools. Like say there's a school that's already doing social emotional learning, you embed the mentors there. The mentors don't have to deliver social emotional learning, but they just support it, provide opportunities to practice it. You reinforce things that the child is already engaged in. The other is what I would call blended mentoring. And that is where the mentor either uses technology or curriculums to deliver the intervention, but you don't count on the mentor to deliver the intervention, because those interventions are often very complicated and have multiple layers. But what a mentor can do is make sure that the young person remains engaged in it. For example, if the child is wanting to learn a new language because they're struggling with friendship or school because they don't speak the language, the mentor and the youth can do Duolingo, which is a technology delivered intervention, together, or they can do Khan Academy together, or they can do Headspace for Kids, or many other interventions that are being delivered now through technology, either as curriculum or as apps, that enable the mentor to not have to deliver the intervention. That happens through the app or through the curriculum, but to support it with what's called supportive accountability. And that, I think, is the road to rigor. The benefits of using things that are online and the universe of online evidence-based interventions is expanding daily are many. So here's just a few of the benefits. Basically, you leave the building of the intervention to the experts, to people who are testing them rigorously and building them on science. And the mentor just makes sure that the young person remains engaged in those. So then you can have, and this is basically the supportive accountability role of mentors. And this is a guy out at Northwestern University. He developed a model referred to as supportive accountability. And he argues that human support increases adherence through accountability to a coach or a mentor who is seen as trustworthy, benevolent, and having expertise. And that's what mentors can do. They can find out what the young person wants to work on, connect them to the very best intervention there is, and then provide that accountability, make sure they stay engaged. And we now are doing a meta-analysis where we're showing that intervention's effectiveness goes way up when there's a mentor to help practice the skills and keep the young person engaged. And so what I would say is that there were mentors in need of evidence-based interventions that were targeted. There's all these evidence-based interventions that need mentors, because without mentors, these wonderful interventions that are being developed, nobody's sticking with them. All of us are guilty of this. We've downloaded an app with the best of intentions or committed to a change with the best intentions. But if you don't have a sponsor or coach or someone to whom you're accountable, it's really hard to stick with change. And that's what this, I think, a new approach to mentoring could be, is bringing those two things together. And I've actually spent the last 2 years developing a platform that's being used by Big Brothers Big Sisters of America that is doing just that. It's helping the young person identify what it is they want to work on and then linking them to the very best tools. It's called MentorHub, and you can find it. It's called mentorhubapp.org. It's a nonprofit, and we're happy to share our expertise or help in any way we can if this model interests you. And the way it works is the young person decides what it is they want to work on, and the mentor can track whether or not they're actually engaging in it. And then all those data go to the match support specialist. There's supervised texting, supervised video chatting. All right, so that's my, and I know there's probably many other solutions, but those are the ones that I can think of and the ones that I'm testing right now with some of the nation's largest mentoring programs, my nation's largest mentoring programs. Happy to work with others. But in the end, I would argue that even in the very best of circumstances, if we got all mentors doing more direct, skills-based, working on something kind of mentoring, we still don't have enough volunteer mentors to go around. Did you know that only 1% of adults in the US serve as a volunteer mentor? I know this because we looked at census data, my colleagues Liz Raposa, Nathan Dietz, and I. And in the census data, there's a question that says, do you volunteer? And then it says, all right, if you say yes, what kind of volunteering? If you say youth mentoring, it'll ask you, all right, how long? Because they didn't want just episodic, like once or twice. They wanted to see if people were in mentoring programs. So they said a school, an academic or a calendar year is what I mentor. And of the people that answered that, only 1% of adults. And again, despite all the work of, mentoring programs to try to recruit more adults, we have not seen that number go up by much over the past decade or more. And so this takes me back to a point I made earlier, which is we really need to think about mentoring as a gift and a precious gift, that hour. And we need to reserve it for the young people who need it most. And we need to squeeze every ounce of value out of that hour. So we need to think about mentoring programs on the kind of the full continuum, that at the very left end are young people who really need professional care because they are struggling, with some sort of challenge that requires professional care. But formal mentoring can play a bigger role, and in doing so, narrow the gaps in care that currently exist, particularly for marginalized kids, and really help the parents who are making those referrals feel that it's a good thing that they made that referral. But then we have new models that kind of are at the interface of informal and formal mentoring that I think we can talk about and think about. For example, youth-initiated mentoring. And what that is, all right, let me just stop for a second. Youth-initiated mentoring is teaching young people how to recruit the natural caring adults that are already in their lives. When I worked as a match support specialist, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, sometimes young people are referred to mentoring simply because they lack positive role models, not because they're facing any challenge. And I would argue that for those young people, maybe the most effective intervention is to encourage them to identify and then provide them with the skills and the scaffolding to reach out to those caring adults. And I would also argue that we need to do that because natural mentoring, if we leave it to chance, actually reproduces inequality. What I mean by that is the more privileged youth are the most likely to find mentors because their parents are and their families are embedded in much more resource intensive ecosystems. And the young people who are most marginalized are least likely to find mentors. And I know this from lots of research, including research that we've done, where we looked at young people who were living in poverty versus those who were not. And in neighborhoods where there was 80% more poverty, the young people were significantly less likely to have a natural mentor. That is somebody like a teacher or a coach or some other caring adult that was looking out for them. And we also found that they were less likely to rely on them for all right, so the orange are people who are not on public assistance, and they rely on their natural mentors as if they're role models to help them find jobs, to help them get ahead in school. Whereas the young people who are living in high poverty networks were more likely to rely on their mentors for more practical, concrete things. What's more, the mentors that they had were more likely to be people in their immediate family, as opposed to teachers and coaches who could connect them to opportunities. So we need to kind of think about natural mentoring as well. And programs need to help scaffold young people's capacity, particularly marginalized young people's capacity to find caring adults in their lives. And I just completed a meta-analysis of youth-initiated mentoring, and you see that it's actually more effective than formal mentoring. I'm not saying that it's a replacement. As I said, a well-trained formal mentor is going to give you much larger effects. But I will say that we have to think about formal mentors as on the continuum of care and reserve them for the young people who need that more targeted evidence-based approach. And that for other youth, simply encouraging them and providing them with the toolkit and the context to recruit mentors is what is more effective. And we actually have created a program called Connected Scholars. And now it's called Connected Futures. And you can go to the website, and it's actually free. And it teaches young people in 4 sessions to recruit a network of support. And we did a trial, and we found that young people who had those 4 sessions were more likely to be comfortable help seeking, They had better relationships with their instructors. They were more engaged in their school, and they had higher grades a year later compared to a randomized comparison group. So we know it's effective. And so that's another thing programs can do to kind of improve the likelihood that young people will find mentors in their lives. So I want to thank you. And I know I've covered a lot of ground. It is 30 years. And I want to open it up to any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you so much.
I have one. So how would this benefit with disabled people?
So thinking about how this approach can work with differently abled communities and how we can leverage these strategies that you're sharing.
Yeah.
That's a great question. And you know, what I'll do is I'll take, whoops, no, I won't. What I was going to say is I can take you back to this particular one, and you see that that mentoring, STEM mentoring for students with disabilities, you see a very large effect when it's particularly for that group. For otherly abled students, we get much larger effects when we are considering you know, that particular population and providing the right tools. I also want to share with you that we just put out a new finding in the, and I describe it in the Chronicle of Evidence-Based Mentoring, that cross-age peer mentors are very, very effective in providing mentoring. And one of the reasons is they're credible messengers, that when you connect people who share a particular value, issue, background, generation even, you get stronger effects. And so I would argue that I would love to see programs that are cross-age and are grounded in evidence. And I believe we'll be seeing much larger effects.
And Jean, you mentioned that you might be willing to share some of these slides with folks after today's event. So
I also want to say that on the mentorhubapp.org website, this talk is there and it's animated with captions. And so if anybody wants to get it there as well, you just scroll down to the science section, but I'll also make these available to anyone that wants them anytime.
Yeah.
This is great. We're open to questions. So if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. I see a follow-up comment here as well in terms of reading and literacy. Are there ways that we can go about addressing some of those barriers to some of these approaches?
Yes. So again, there are many programs that are focused on literacy and reading, mentoring programs with that as their particular focus. And I would wager that if I put them on this chart, skills-based approach, we would see a large effect for those because they fall into the category of being skills-based approaches. I would say that mentors, even untrained, less trained mentors, like mentors who may not have had training in literacy, can use apps that are available, like Khan Academy has really good reading tools and literacy tools, and they can work alongside their mentee to provide the kind of training and support and scaffolding that are needed to address that issue or any issue.
Great. We've got some really great questions that are just rolling into the chat. So what we're going to do is bring this into a bit of a list so that we can try to answer as many questions as possible.
Okay.
All right. So the first one here is how to create academic strategies that promote a pro-social, self-transcendent purpose for learning action that will benefit society and the world. Very simple question, I'm sure. But I think some of the key words here is looking at academic strategies and some of these words of like pro-social promotion and a self-driven, self-actualizing approach as well, which I think comes into this idea of critical mentorship rather than status quo.
Yeah. So So I've been doing some work around critical mentorship, and I believe that, the strategy that I ended with, the youth initiated mentoring piece, I think is the empowerment edge of this, that we're empowering young people. We're not giving them a fish, we're teaching them to fish. And so that's one way, is empowering young people with tools. But you can't just teach someone to fish. You have to stock the ponds. There have to be contexts that are more mentor rich, that are more adult rich. And you see inequities in that. You see that particularly in the US, in schools where there's, that are serving young people in poverty, there's far fewer adults per youth. So it's an equity issue that needs to be addressed. We need to really think of this as an issue around democracy, around happiness, because if we don't have mentors available for young people to recruit, we are in some ways impeding their right to happiness and a fulfilling life, because mentors are so vitally important. So I think we need to do it on both sides. We need to empower young people to recruit mentors, but we also need to fight for equity in the availability of mentors across different contexts. So that's one thing. The other thing is this new study that I have on cross-age peer mentoring. I really think it's an eye-opener, because what it says is that high school students can go into elementary schools and middle schools, and with adequate training, they can produce effects that are double those of intergenerational relationships. We often think of mentorship just in terms of older people coming in, and they're often crossing race and crossing other boundaries. And when you pair a middle school to a high school, typically you have much greater diversity and similarity across these contexts, and you value what a young person can do for another young person. So I think mentoring, if we could really embrace that model and do it right, could be a model where by the time someone leaves high school, they've provided service. And the best predictor of ongoing service, of ongoing giving back to one's community, is early volunteering. So I would love to see peer mentoring, cross-age peer mentoring instantiated in every high school, because it works. It creates double the effect sizes.
Thank you.
YouthREX, we talk a lot about how to evaluate the impacts of our work. And someone asked a question about, thinking about evaluating mentoring programs. What do you think are the most important measures to indicate success? Would those be reaching the youth's goals? Would they be, the mentor and mentee's feelings about the relationship, a sense of empowerment? How would you describe those measures? What would those measures be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. What I would argue is you start a program by saying, what is it we want to change? What is the outcome variable? Okay, because that's one of the problems with these meta-analyses, why the big programs are not showing strong effects, is they're trying to change everything, right? So if you've ever looked at like a large mentoring program's evaluation, we're looking at mental health, we're looking at academics, behavior, relationship, everything. And when you try to change everything at once, you often don't change anything. I think you need to start by saying, what is it that we really want to change? Because let's work on one thing at a time, really. And then you find the very best questionnaire or way of measuring that. Okay, so if you want to measure, grades, you see if you can get the school records and you measure grades or attendance, or if you want to measure mental health, or if you want to measure sense of empowerment. We've measured help-seeking behaviors. Whatever it is you want to change, that's what you should find the questionnaire for. And don't make a questionnaire. I think I've seen too many mentoring programs think that homegrown questionnaires are just as good as what's been rigorously developed and published. But there are many open source databases, including the National Mentoring Resource Center of Mentor, the US Mentor, that have databases that if you click on it and you say, I want to measure depression, and it'll give you a free questionnaire that you can use that has been validated. So I just want to encourage two things. One is measure what it is that you're trying to change very carefully, and don't try to measure everything, and use validated questionnaires.
That's great. We have so many questions rolling in, and I know we just have about 5 more minutes. I wonder if you have any more suggestions for resources. This question asks, do you have any suggestions for resources for training mentors in a way that will prepare them for engaging in and maintaining effective mentoring relationships with youth?
Yeah, so, the National Mentoring Partnership and Mentor Canada, I am certain, have lots of resources and trainings available, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one place to look. What I have been developing through Mentor Hub is a suite of trainings on therapeutic mentoring, because I believe that a good mentor has comfort and knowledge of mental health issues because of the data that we've seen, on supportive accountability, which is basically, sometimes it's referred to as motivational interviewing, but it's getting people to want to change. You can't, you can go in and say, let's roll up our sleeves and really tackle this, but the person has to value that goal and be committed to that goal. And mentors need to know when to press the levers and when to let up, and, just focus on humor and the relationship. We've also got a training on something called working alliance. And this is a notion that comes from child and adolescent psychotherapy. And it's the notion that we're not trying to build a relationship. We're trying to build a working alliance because we're working on things together. And there's a professor down at University of South Florida I've worked very closely with, who did lots of studies to identify what is it that helps build a working alliance between a caring adult and a young person. And you would be surprised. I mean, there's certain things. And then he and I developed a training around that. So I think that all of those kinds of trainings, to the extent that we can make them available for free online, that's what we're trying to do, and asynchronous, so people can take them in as they need. The other thing I would argue is that we need to recognize mentoring as a workforce development tool. So it's not just a one-way relationship. The mentor who goes through all that training should get certificates, continuing ed units, course credits, things that they can put on LinkedIn, so that everybody is gaining from this relationship, and the mentor is encouraged and incentivized to keep learning and getting better and better. And the more that we can turn mentors into paraprofessional helpers, the more we can shift tasks from highly trained professionals and reduce the gaps that exist currently in service acquisition.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know that your work has supported YouthREX in developing resources as well. I know Veronique from Mentor Canada has shared a link or a few links to resources. And of course, we encourage folks who are joining us today to visit YouthREX's Knowledge Hub. We have a featured collection on mentorship. And what we try to do with our resources is connect all of this knowledge, all of this evidence to practice with practicable strategies. And I think in a lot of the resource development work that we do and the capacity building work that we do, we really try to center that relationship between the young person and the youth worker. There's a question here, Jean. Any advice on supporting Indigenous communities where effective mentoring is happening in a context in which mentors or mentees, for that matter, may be distrustful of Western academic traditions and what Western governments consider evidence? So thinking about the fact that different communities have different ways of knowing and doing, and so how do you reconcile that? And is that part of your definition of evidence when you're working with different communities?
That is a really good question. And I think, I come from the Western empirical, reductionistic quantitative background. And so I have to make that clear, and that there's many ways of knowing and stories and, more anecdotal ways of knowing. There's things we know in our heart. But I would also argue at risk of diminishing that point, which I really believe, that sometimes anecdotes and stories have a way of they're very compelling and moving us away from, really taking a hard look at what we're doing and making sure that it's working, right? And I talk about this a lot in my book. We have sort of a confirmation bias where we only hear what we want to hear and we dismiss. So if you looked at my slides and you said, well, that doesn't ring true for my experience, so that must be wrong. I think we need to balance different ways of knowing and really believe them all. I refer to the work that Renee's done, which is purely based on qualitative research. As long as the work has standards and we all agree to those standards and we can value the results, I think we have to be open to different ways of knowing, including empirical ways of knowing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jean. We've come to the end of our Q&A time with you. I know that other folks have questions that we didn't get to. And is there a way, Jean, that folks can connect with you after the fact or with the Center for Evidence-Based Mentoring?
Yeah,
is that the
so
best way?
I think the best way is to just email me, jean.rhodes@umb.edu, or go, if they want to find out more about Mentor Hub, go to the Mentor Hub website and sign up for a demo. I also see that Lauren has done an amazing visual representation. And
oh yes, we want to shout out Lisa from ThinkLink. We want to share what you've been working on for the last 55 minutes, which is a visual notes of Jean's presentation and our conversation afterwards. And we will be able to make this available to folks as a resource after the event. So thank you, Lisa. And thank you so much, Jean, for being with us today. We really appreciate your time and your sharing with us.
Thank you so much. And good luck with everything you do. And thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move on to our first performance of the day. I'm so excited to be able to introduce Jayda Marley. Jayda is a 20-year-old nationally acclaimed Afro-Indigenous poet, youth activist, and community support worker of Ojibwe and Jamaican descent, born and raised in Toronto. She's the founder and creative director of an open mic series, as well as the co-founder of the nonprofit movement, Not Another Black Life. She hosts her own workshop series called Between the Lines, which is a space created by her to empower BIPOC femme writers in the GTA. And her overall goal is to educate and break barriers within racialized and underserved communities to help spark hope in young minds in order for them to change the narrative and use their creativity to take part in a more revolutionary future. Jayda, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I was sitting back and I was listening to talking about mentoring. And mentoring is a really important part of even my childhood, even my younger youth days. So I'm really excited to be here and hear about it. One thing that I actually noticed that, of course, we're talking about mentoring and changing spaces. One thing that I noticed when I was listening is I think some people are afraid to say Black youth or afraid to say Indigenous youth. So I just want to make sure that, we're not afraid to use these words, constantly calling communities, underserved and marginalized and, priority communities and things like this. I think a lot of those words are words that really rubbed me the wrong way because I remember those days and I remember being referred to as something that I didn't feel like. And so, I want us to be really mindful of language. I'm going to share 2 poems with you guys today. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's be honest about the communities that we're serving. This first one is really short, and then the other 2, 3 poems. This first one's really short, and the other 2 are a little bit lengthy. I'm gonna talk a bit about identity. I didn't truly understand people until I started teaching youth how to write out their pain. We're constantly changing and forgetting, but a true educator can always put words to a face. And I'll always remember how they made rhymes out of their hurt. I'll always remember the way they formed art out of their traumas and liquidated anger into ink so they could write haikus. I'll always remember the way a poet can make death read like a reflection of life and tell the story of their lost loved ones better than the news. And I don't know if you've ever witnessed an angry child break a screw face to smile or be proud of something they have done, or shed a tear in the back room because they were taught to never cry in front of anyone. But there's nothing I appreciate more than ghetto youth becoming, because I remember how it felt when I became. And I saw the greatness in who I was, and I saw the light in all the trauma I faced. And I headed on a new path that didn't force me to be afraid of the place from which I came. A ticket to the revolution. I don't know where we are really from, or where my people's first drop of blood flowed, or where we have been, or where we are going. But I know the blood of our people is running through waters I've never swam through, on streets I've never crossed, in countries I've never been to, and in the faces of people I may never meet. I know the spirits of our people dance and pray over the paths that we walk on, and the places they intended for us to see. I know the spirits of our people are still stomping out the fires of modern day white supremacy. I know that if you ever gave me a time machine, I would ask if it could take me home, and I would ask to take all of my people there with me, to go back to the places where our mother tongues first broke through our teeth. Black people have been captured and shipped and sent out across seas. Now we are being trapped in the projects and being clipped of our wings. Mass incarceration and dying by police. We were stolen from our homes to build on indigenous territories while the colonizers rested shady under stolen trees, plotting on how they would break the hands that feed. I wonder what my people are seeing and what they have already seen. I wonder how what we have gone through has created this fire inside of me. The Black youth have been telling me that the war will be over soon, and sometimes I find hope hard to hold on to, and then I hear them speak about how they are in the kitchen cooking up revolutionary recipes, on stage speaking words straight from their bloodstreams, in the workforce dismantling, in the classroom decolonizing, writing their own books for the melanated children after us to read. They told me that the future is marinating in the palms of the original Mother Africa, and we won't need any other map but the creases on her hand and the guidance in her feet. And we won't need a clock where we are going because there's nowhere else to be. And we won't need money where we're going, so leave your wallets and come home. It's back to a natural life that doesn't work us to the bone. No more Babylon and no more pain. The Black utopia of our dreams is waiting for us once we escape the rat race, where we will return to the first soils and hear the first sounds of true peace and walk in harmony with the roots of our family trees. For generations, we have been traveling. Now it is time to get home. For generations, we have been building a society never meant for us. This time, we are choosing the places that we will go. And the next poem, the last final poem is called The Indian Problem. So I obviously heard you guys addressing things with youth of color, Black youth, Indigenous youth. And I heard a question, somebody asked like, well, what about the Indigenous youth? And I feel like sometimes, like I heard the answer. I don't think there was much of an answer. And so I think we really need to actually think about that. When we're being asked, what about the Indigenous youth? What about the Black youth? You know, and first of all, not just asking because we feel like we have to, but because we really, really want to see a change. Also, I see people talking about my Instagram in the comments. I just want to let you guys know I'm actually not on social media right now. That is my Instagram that was shared. I'm not, my pages are not open right now. I'm taking a bit of a break. So yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that. This poem is called The Indian Problem. My family is the Indian problem that no one wants to talk about. The first time I saw my mother cry native tears, I was 15. Funerals hit harder when they force you back into yourself. I was born to a niche mother with fair skin. She chose the easy way out. Assimilation was the best safety blanket adoption had to offer. My mother held a funeral for her indigeneity the day she was chosen by 2 redneck parents. She held a funeral for my indigeneity long before I was born. I want to tell my mother I never consented to this. Every time I visit my mother's home, I sleep in the basement where she keeps her paintings of what she remembers from Indian life, hidden underground, like she's attempting to bury them with our ancestral tree. My mother is the Indian problem that no one wants to talk about. She was robbed long before she had formed in my grandmother's womb. They whitewashed her mother tongue and tried to bleach out every native stain in her memory. I want to tell my mother that she is not the only one, that our people take up more than 50% of the foster care system. I want to tell her that I never feel at home either, that I too feel alone when I remember every woman who was born to our family before her is gone. My grandmother was the Indian problem that no one ever talks about. A white hand covered all of our mouths and hushed away the elephant in the room the day she died. Alcoholism has been taking my family out for as many people as I can count down our bloodline. My grandmother drank gin like she was trying to drown out the body of Christ that was forced down her throat. The last time I saw my grandmother in the hospital, she couldn't remember who I was. She called me by my mother's name and asked me to forgive her. My grandmother moved to Toronto when I was 15 so that she could start a life with me and my siblings. It was the first time I ever saw someone put actions to their apologies. 2 months later, she lay fighting for her life on a Sunnybrook hospital bed. The city kills Indigenous dreams. It has been putting my wishes to sleep for all 20 years of my life. When we put her to rest, my mother cried enough tears to make up for all of the years I never saw her shed one. And for a split second, I thought there was enough water to lead us home. But my mother drinks tequila like she's trying to burn all of the native memories in her heart to the ground. She inhales red cigarettes like oxygen, but she never burns the sage I offer her. My family bleeds intergenerational trauma and toxicity to contaminate any love that tries to overpower our outer shield. We are a product of being ripped apart for generations and never trying to reattach ourselves or heal. My family is the Indian problem no one ever talks about. You will not find my mother at ceremony or in the words of any phony land acknowledgement. Our true history is not in any academic book or hidden behind any ancestry.com fee. My family is the Indian problem they have chosen for you to not see. So yeah, that is, those are my 3 poems. I hope you guys learned something from any of them. I really wanted to address intersectionality, just being a woman, being a Black woman, trying to break ceilings and all those great things. Obviously being a youth, which is super, super important. And yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I hope to see some of you again in other events. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jayda. There's so many comments, there's lots of snaps, there's lots of emojis. Thank you so much for being with us today. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jenny.
Hi everyone. My name is Jenny, and we will be moving to the panel on critical youth mentorship practices. So for this section, we have 4 fantastic program representatives to speak about their youth program mentorship practices. And in order, we have Caitlin Wang, Executive Director of LIGHT. So LIGHT stands for Lead, Inspire, Grow, Hope, and Transform, and is located in the Greater Toronto area. And then following that will be Nicole Cruz, Volunteer Program Coordinator of Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, located in Thunder Bay. Following Nicole will be Kimberly Grotto, a youth employment worker representing New Beginnings, located in Windsor. And last but not least will be Marquez Ramsey, Program Director of SWAG, which stands for Success with Age and Guidance, and is located in the Peel region. So I believe that these speakers will be highlighted, and please turn your attention towards them. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And a huge shout out to Jayda for that incredible performance. I'll be definitely bringing a lot of those thoughts that you shared and reflecting on them through into the afternoon and later this week. So I'm here representing LIGHT. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the introduction. So we are an organization that's based in the GTA, and we focus on leadership capacity building, advocacy, and event planning. Our members, who are mainly in high school, have coordinated over 12 initiatives in the past year, which have collectively served over 500 young people across Canada and even internationally, thanks to virtual delivery. So the practices that we wanted to share, especially through our experience, is not only coordinating our own fellowship training program for high school students, but also as youth ourselves, receiving mentorship from a lot of adults, are on the next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the first one is to provide safe opportunities to engage in meaningful dialogue around race, identity, oppression, and discrimination. So this looks like allowing respectful conversations to share lived experiences and opinions, thereby allowing for like idea exchange, but also catharsis, and normalizing speaking about the realities of these issues and seeking solution building together and collectively. The second one is helping youth identify strengths and opportunities for change in their community. So a best practice that we employ at LIGHT is we don't usually instruct our members on like what events they have to coordinate. We usually open the floor up to them, where they are allowed to explore the issues that are close to their heart, that affect their communities, that they feel like there are gaps in their communities that require addressal. And then from there, they're allowed to select the ones that they think would be most impactful to serve those around them. So in that way, we're not instructive, but we also just support youth in trying to seek those things that they are most passionate about. And in doing so, we've helped some young people even find things that they didn't even know previously that they were passionate about. The third one is engaging adults to support youth in taking charge of their own conditions and challenging power systems. So we recently delivered an adult allyship seminar where we discussed the importance of adults, viewing youth equally, valuing their contributions and not like undermining their opinions and their thoughts, but also challenging them in the same way that they would challenge like an adult colleague. So this isn't to say to be trying to confuse young people with like esoteric language, but to be youth friendly and cognizant in your language. And in addition, we also encourage adult mentors to confront their own biases and preconceived notions, especially around ageism and prejudice notions that they might have around young people and their status. The fourth one that we outlined is setting clear expectations about each person's contributions and gains. So this is something that we really used in our policy advocacy team because we saw that there was a discrepancy between what the executives thought the young people wanted out of the program and what the actual members wanted. So we realized that there was this misunderstanding where we thought they wanted a certain outcome out of it because we thought they wanted experience more on the academic side with like research and synthesis, whereas they really wanted the opportunity to be able to produce presentations, speak with local politicians, and really practice those skills instead. So I think the lesson here is to set clear expectations about what each party is hoping to gain out of it. And I also think that an important note to be made here is to ensure that both parties recognize that there is something to be gained out of it. So both the mentor and the mentee are able to learn and grow from this relationship. So I think this allows both parties to assess if this is a good fit. So if this is a good match between the mentor and the mentee, but it also allows you to later down the line, evaluate whether or not your program has been successful in meeting the goals that you initially set out together. And it also involves young people in the creation of evaluation tools and in the creation of the metrics that you define as your success. And then the last one is engaging in adaptive communication, sharing values, and establishing boundaries. So these three things are all very, very important. The first one being adaptive communication. We like to describe that as like meeting youth where they're at. So, you know, maybe young people aren't as comfortable using email, for example. Maybe you can use a social media platform instead, like Instagram, and you'll realize that you'll get a lot more response rate and engagement with through that avenue. In terms of sharing values, we really like to find common grounds in terms of like what matters to both parties. This looks like anything like, you know, integrity, compassion, honesty, hard work. This just sets up a really positive environment from the beginning and also kind of holds both parties accountable to these values that you both find important. And then the last one is establishing boundaries. So obviously for all persons, there are things that we're comfortable with, that we're not comfortable with. So it's really important that from the get-go, that we share these in order to foster a really safe environment for everybody so that we're not endangering anybody and we're respecting everybody's boundaries. And this is also a best practice to allow young people to get used to establishing the boundaries and making those clear to other individuals, regardless if you're in a mentor-mentee relationship or you're just in a working relationship. So those are the critical mentorship practices that we like to share. And thank you so much for YouthREX for having us. And I'm so excited to hear the rest of the panel's best practices.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. So next, I believe, is Nicole.
Hi there. I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you again for having us here. So I'll just talk about a little bit about the Thunder Bay Multicultural Association and what we do here in Thunder Bay. So we're pretty much a newcomer agency. So we help all the families that comes as all types of like way into Canada, whether that's refugees or immigrants, or through like a specific employment program. But I'm going to be focusing more on the youth program. So technically, I'm the volunteer coordinator for the Community Connections program. But I also am involved into the youth program. We have about 4 workers that is involved in the program. Around the youth program, we mainly focused for all the newcomers between the ages 7 to 29. And we try to help them with, you know, identifying their culture and identity, employment and entrepreneurship, academics, recreation, and leadership. So those things kind of looks like we don't want them to forget where they come from. So we do a lot of events around, you know, cultural events. So whether that's having a cooking session where they can all come together and prepare their own food and kind of share that. Also a lot of talking about where they also come from, sharing things that they probably miss from home or something that they want to do here, a specific event or festival that was, you know, was done back home or celebrated back home and they want to do it here in Thunder Bay. So we also create activities like that. Employment and entrepreneurship. I have one of the youth workers that really focus on helping them with, you know, resume building and preparing them for interviews and getting them ready for, you know, work. And there was something else. So helping them search also for jobs and kind of prepare them to be self-confident and kind of do it themselves and find jobs. In terms of academics, mostly focused on, because we have a lot of newcomers that comes to Thunder Bay and some of them doesn't have, you know, good English skills. So we help them with tutoring and match them with mentors that is able to help them improve their English. We also have a program in the schools pre-COVID, before the lockdowns and all that stuff. It was called the Multicultural Club. So that was a space where all of our newcomer youth can come and feel safe there and interact with other newcomer youth. And there also used to be activities during those clubs where it would be around confidence building as well. Give them the opportunity to talk about their class, their school. We also had 2 specific workers that would just spend time there, and the newcomer youth will be able to feel safe and come and talk to them about things that they're going through or any help or assistance that they may need. Recreation, we try to keep the youth you know, engage in activities. So we try to, well, we always organize events around pretty much everything. So that could be sports game nights. We'll have art nights, take them out into the city, learn about, you know, new buildings and things that they can get familiar with, that they could do in the city. And also leadership. So we host a lot of workshops around, again, self-confidence. There's where we can teach them how to do presentations. There's also mentoring and getting them involved into volunteering. We also have a lot of our co-op students come into the organization, and that also, I find that, you know, builds their leadership skills too. I don't know if there's another slide. Yes, and I think for us, like the critical, like, you know, mentorship practices that we have and that we do for the youth is we try to, from the beginning, we try to, when we meet the youth, we try to build this trust right away. So that's, you know, having consistent communication with them, trying to find out what their exact goals are, like if they want to go to, you know, after they finish high school, they want to go to college or university. What are they looking for? A specific job? Do they want to be matched with like someone that maybe they're interested in becoming a lawyer? So our job is to find, you know, a mentor that is able to, maybe that is a lawyer or have lawyer backgrounds, and is able to kind of prepare them for that type of route that they want to go into. We also refer them to other programs or agencies that there is in town that they could benefit with. So the whole building trust there, I think, is for us the most important part for the youth, and then we kind of build on that. And then the second, consider mentee goals and mentor interest for a successful match. So as I was saying, so if there's a youth that, you know, is looking forward into going into college, but it's not, you know, doesn't know the college route, so we try to find a mentor that would be able to guide them into that route and how to prepare them for success, and kind of talk about how college experience is, and then sometimes we'll host, you know, college field trips, so we'll take them there and kind of do a like a orientation kind of you know, thing for them. Third one would be create safe spaces for youth. So as I was mentioning, Multicultural Club was one of the big ones when school was open, and we were able to host multicultural clubs. And that also, because of this Multicultural Club too, this also gave the youth, I found, as I mentioned before, the self-confidence, because this specific club is built for them to create something. So a good example was when in May we focus a lot on multicultural weeks. So all of the youth involved in this club creates their own events. So during that week, there was cooking day, then there was like a dancing day, and then there was an art day. And then, so each day of the week, there was something different based on cultures. And I think that was a successful time for all of the newcomer youth in that club, because they felt, you know, very happy, and that they get to share their culture with everybody else in the school. So so the fourth point would be group youth with similar interest. So sometimes, you know, some youth are not able to be matched right away with a mentor or a volunteer. So what we do is whenever there's, you know, a group of youth that is interested in this, in a similar hobby. So let's say there's 5 youth interested in cooking, they want to learn how to cook. So we'll try to partner up with other organizations or businesses in town and create a cooking class. And then youth will be able to still explore their interests and hobbies and stuff like that. And then meet youth where they are at. So basically, as it goes all the way back to number 1, so keeping that, you know, trust going, that communication going, seeing how we can help them more, always talking to them, asking them what their needs are, what are they currently struggling with, what else did they need help with, and try to just get them prepared for basically success and feeling safe in the community, and then go from there.
Thank you, Nicole. So next will be Kim with New Beginnings.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having New Beginnings a part of this. It's been fantastic so far. So my name is Kim Grotto. I'm a youth employment worker with the Youth Job Connection program here at New Beginnings. It's a government-funded, not-for-profit program through Employment Ontario. We serve youth ages 15 to 19 who experience multiple and/or complex barriers to employment. So we provide them with more intensive supports beyond your traditional job search and placement opportunities. So the 5 critical youth mentorship practices that we find are crucial for the youth that we serve is number 1 being transportation. Without transportation, our youth will miss employment. They won't be able to get to work on time, whatever it may be, medical appointments. So we definitely offer them transportation. In the means of doing that, we are also providing them with how to be responsible and how to be accountable for their own life. So even if that is giving them agendas so they can keep track of their appointments, some bus tickets to get them to and from their appointments that they need to go to. So that's one of our major mentorship pieces that we do offer our clientele. The second one is advocating for our youth, especially when it comes to employment. A lot of the employers need our mentorship to be able to provide the youth so they can get to and from work, so they can be able to deal with conflict as it arises with the employer as well, and to guide them through those necessary steps to be successful. Providing ongoing support with their mental health, continuing our youth go through daily struggles when it comes to mental health, whether they are diagnosed or undiagnosed. So we are there for them every day, providing them with the necessary support to get through their daily struggles and tasks. Also helping clients with proper identification. A lot of our services offered here within Windsor. It's hard for our youth to access those services without ID. And I would say 85% of the youth that we work with don't have ID. So to be able to provide them with that is huge. And also connecting and collaborating with all of our partners that we work with. That is another big one for us. So just referring our youth and connecting them with all the services that they need to be successful within their own lives, especially if it's something that we cannot provide. We are going to make sure they get that help and support they need to be successful within their own lives, with us walking behind them every step of the way to ensure their success. So once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate being part of this.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. So next we have Marquez with SWAG.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to YouthREX for having me. And then also just want to say a huge shout out to Jayda. I think one of the things I thought about is I grew up hearing that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And you listen to that when you're younger, and then as you become older, you recognize the power of words and how important words are. And especially us who are young people and who work with young people, it's important for us to recognize the power of our words, but also take accountability for our words as well. So just wanted to start off and just share that and say shout out to Jayda. So I represent SWAG, Success with Agent Guidance, which started off as a mentorship program, a grassroots mentorship program that was created about a decade ago by, I think it was about 4 or 5 of us that came together that either lived or worked in the community and really wanted to identify, is there a particular need in the community that the current programming that's offered isn't being addressed? And in our conversations, we recognized that there wasn't necessarily a space for young men to come together and engage in critical conversation, have access to civic engagement, program facilitation, mentorship, and then have conversations around education, right? When I talked to some of the young men that were working on the initiative at the time, their first time on a post-secondary campus was their first day, which is very different than, and I realized this once I was in university and working with different groups, that's not necessarily the reality for everybody that attends post-secondary. So we wanted to ensure that youth knew what their post-secondary options were, whether it was college, university, or the trades. But then they also got an opportunity to engage with people that worked on campus, go to campuses, feel what it's like to be in the space and to sit in a library and some of those sort of pieces. So you can start to visualize yourself in those spaces. As we think exposure is a big part of motivation. I think exposure is a big part of motivation and bringing yourself in a space and really seeing that you could be there. And then the last piece was around community events and workshops. We think one of the pieces that we realized through doing this work is that the extensions of youth are very important as you work with them, not just really working around the attendance of that youth, but thinking about the communities that they're in, the schools that they're connected to, their families, all of those sort of pieces. And so how do we create opportunities to bring all that together to really increase engagement across? Can I go to the next slide? Thanks. So the 3 main sort of practices that I want to talk through are strength-based and culturally anchored approaches, taking into account lived experience in youth-led mentorship selection, and then the collaborative peer model approach that we've used. And so SWAG initially started out offering a drop-in program for youth in the community. And then over the last few years, we were able to get funding to extend our programming to offer a more focused leadership development program for young Black males. And so in that, when we think about development programs, one of the things that we really want to do is look at the need that's in the community, but then go into the research to ensure that we have the right models in place to support the populations that we're working with. So when we thought about our leadership program is around looking at 5 practices of exemplary leadership, using a strength-based and culturally anchored approach with a spotlight on Black excellence, right? And when we think about strength-based, is just recognizing that every youth that we come into contact with have strengths within them, and it's really just how are we looking at the situations that, or some of the challenges that they're facing, and what are the strengths that we can leverage in order to move forward. And so the other part of that piece for us is really ensuring that our examples and the things that we talk about are culturally relevant and anchored. And some of that is really looking at both historical as well as relevant or contemporary events or examples of leaders and peoples that they're able to relate to. Especially when we think about Black leadership, I think oftentimes we look at the US and some of the leaders or movements that have happened in the US. And so I think a lot of that is important and has impacted the way that we see ourselves in Canada, but how do we draw on relevant folks that are Canadian and using Canadian examples, or even from a local and community context, who are some of the leaders that we could look at, what are some of the events that are happening, and how do we pull from those sort of pieces to ensure that the youth have relevant examples that they can speak through. I think when we think about the account of lived experience, I know often in spaces that I've worked in, we always look at gender as well as ethnic diversity as factors or identifiers when looking at mentorship selection. And so I think we have to move away from that a bit, or expand that. I wouldn't necessarily say move away, but expand it a bit in terms of our program to also understanding lived experience. Because sometimes gender or identity or ethnic identity as sole factors of identifying who an appropriate mentorship may miss the mark. And so it's important for us to also look at that young person's lived experiences and what are some of their needs and interests, and how do we find mentors that can relate from those core tenets, and not just based on the other factors. And then the last piece is really using a collaborative or peer model mentor. And for us, it's really, how do you work with youth and how do you have youth-led initiatives? And for us, it's all of our young people that come into our program, we provide them the opportunities to really identify what do we need in this program and help us build out the curriculum. So we do make sure at the beginning, we work with them to create contracts around how they want to hold space, what the conversation should look like, what are the topics that they want to talk about, what are some of their needs. And so that way they feel like they've been a part of the entire process. And then also figure out, where do we create opportunities for the young people to mentor each other, whether formally or informally. And so we've done that in a few different ways, whether it was bringing back youth who have attended program before, but still wanted to be engaged and didn't necessarily know how, giving them different leadership opportunities within the program, whether it was to mentor other youth or to facilitate workshops, right? And for us is giving them the language to be able to identify some of the skill development pieces that they could then use in an interview or put on a resume, and show the way that they've not only been attendees of a program, but they've contributed to programs through program development, program facilitation, and some of those skill sets that they're then able to leverage once they move beyond the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all 4 of our youth program representatives for sharing your critical mentorship practices. It was all very insightful. Thank you so much. So I'll be turning it back to Katie.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jenny. And thank you everyone for sharing. As we mentioned, we will be sharing the slides from today's session. So you will be able to take those critical youth mentorship practices that were shared and apply them to your work. And again, we encourage you to share your practices on our online community of practice, REX Virtual Cafe. We are moving into our health and wellness break. Part 2 of this event is scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock. But before that, we do want to offer a session, and I'm so excited to welcome and introduce you to Renelyn Quinicot. Renelyn is a queer Filipina artist and movement and meditation teacher. She was born and raised on the indigenous lands of Takaranto. Her offerings include Kundalini yoga, Pilates, aerobic exercise, yoga nidra, and more. She is passionate about exploring the body as a keeper of story and lineage, play as a radical act of resistance, and is most of all passionate about sharing supportive breathing tools to remind us of our own body as a wise resource of care. So we invite you all to stay with us for this Tools for Care session led by Renelyn, and I'm going to turn it over to Renelyn now.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Sounds like a really jam-packed day today, so we'll get right into it. If you're choosing to move with us today, you can even just join by viewing and by sending us your energy. If you feel like moving, just clear some space for yourself. You don't even really need a mat. If you're okay on your floor and your carpet, that's cool too. I know you want to have a good juicy break in between, so we'll get right to the good stuff. So for the next few minutes, we'll take this for about 20 to 25 minutes. We'll start by moving. We'll ground first, and then we'll shake ourselves out. We'll do a bit of bouncing around, get our heart working. Especially if you've been seated at your desk all day, it might feel really good to do that. And then we'll spice things up a bit. Just checking that you can hear this music, yeah? Everyone okay with that? Hold on, I can't even see you. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, and then we'll end in a nice breathwork meditation so you're set for the rest of your day on screen, something to balance us out. So let's get started. I'm gonna get some music more appropriate. We're gonna start standing actually. We'll take the heels in and the toes turned out. So that's a nice sturdy stance. That means a bit wider than the hips and then heavying the eyelids. Maybe they completely close. Maybe they stay slightly open. We find somewhere to land. Maybe taking a quick inventory of how you're feeling so far, the information you've been gathering, how is it sitting? And we can do that just by checking in with the breath even. Our breath, our most honest thing we have. Give yourself a chance to listen into it the way it's speaking. Our breath carries this source of information. It's short when we're nervous. It's full when we're calm. Take a moment to observe without changing anything. And as your breath arrive today in this moment of standing. And then so softly, we'll take a big breath in. Sweep the arms up overhead. Take a nice big reach. Use your exhale, pour your arms down by the sides of body. And we'll flicker the eyes open and start to move a little bit deeper, a little bit more to rhythm. Start that by rolling your shoulders forward, seeing what that feels like. Your chin falls to your chest. Your fingers get nice and heavy. And then take a deep bend through your knees and start to pour yourself all the way down, maybe finding the thighs and then elbows bend into them. Maybe your fingers find the floor. Can you get real heavy through the head? And then thread it through your shoulders. Lift your head up where your throat shines. Take a wiggle through your neck. And then reverse that. Send the bum high, extend your legs. Let's ripple up bone by bone. So especially if you've been seated for a few hours, is a nice way to just massage out the spine. We'll try that 2 more times. Maybe inhaling to lower, tapping whatever feels good, and then pouring down. And then let these first few shapes be an invitation to start to get to know what your body feels like and let that lead. So despite what I shared today, it's your practice, it's your body. So tune in to what might feel better if this is not what feels good. Pick up the tempo here. We're rolling up, picking back, rolling forward, and then dipping the hips. Lift, roll back, roll forward, dip the hips. Whew, finding that rhythm in the song. Hopefully you hear it okay. We're gonna keep that going, this time with breath. Woo, exhaling to rise. Keep that going, let's go for 4. Yes, I'm glad you like it. Remix. Nothing like a remix to energize you, right? I hope so. Yeah, so the intention for the next few minutes to really shake things up, right? Let's hold at the top, change the version. So we're gonna throw the arms forward, pelvis goes back, and then arms go back, pelvis goes forward. We try it with breath, inhale forward, exhale back. Like it's rocking your pelvis. And your arms get real heavy, moving like waves of water. Find your breath here. We go inhale, exhale. Ha. Ha. Let yourself hear yourself breathing. Feel yourself breathing. If you've been silent and on mute for a while, this is a nice chance in your own privacy, in your own space, to let yourself be heard. Ha. A cathartic release. Ha. Maybe it's a big breath. Ha! Maybe it's a sound at the top. Ha! One only you can hear. Ha! Really let keeping rinse off the fingers. Go for 4. Ha! Go for 3. Ha! Maybe closing the eyes. 4. Ha! Last one. Get heavy. Roll forward. Dangle yourself here. Woo! Catch your breath. Nice bend in the knees. Just like we started. Spread your head through your shoulders. Lift your chest. So wiggle through the neck. Woo! Press into your feet, lift your bum, and roll up. Nice and slow. Boom, ba-doop, boom, boom. Ah. At the top, nice and slowly, arms go high overhead. Woo! So hopefully you're feeling a little warmer. We're gonna press the sides of the body down, nice and slow. And then just let the arms be loose and heavy, and then tuck your feet in a little closer. They come parallel underneath your hips. We're gonna find a teeny tiny pulse of your heels. Your heels will go up, 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 up. Woo. Okay, and then see what it feels like to get a little lower in your knees. Find that bounce from your heels, 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 heels. So let's explore here, less about right and wrong, more about feeling what your body's craving. If your body wants a shake of the arms, maybe it wants the flow of the arms. The only thing I'm instructing is the feet. So you choose what the arms do. You know those wacky wavy inflatable tube men? The one at the gas station? That's their moves right now. Let your body embody how it's feeling. Maybe closing the eyes, let the arms flow. Let the fingers explore. Your body, your practice, For you. We bounce a little lower. Woo! Ooh, ah, e. Okay. Keep that going. We got 6. 5, waking up the neighbors downstairs. Last 2, hold on here. We get heavy through the heels. Now our toes. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Yay! Getting warm. All right, we're gonna put those 2 together, make it cute, make it dancy. We're gonna take it out to the sides here. I'll show you in 4, 3, 2, 1. Just your heels turn out. Your toes turn out. The heels turn out. The toes turn out. Take it in. Out. Bending our knees. We're waking up the roots of you. The ankles, the toes. Woo! Maybe they've been nice and still for the past few hours, so give them a chance to breathe, to circulate blood, to find aliveness. Okay. Next time you're in, hold down to knees. Let's just explore with the arms. Take a look around you. Maybe we're back to those wacky, wavy, inflatable tube persons. Ones that wave in the wind, that get low and try different directions as we bounce with the knees. Woo! Keep anchored in those heels. Let the arms get high. Let the fingers go low. Last few. All right, we're gonna wakey our glutes, our bums. Take a nice big step of your right leg up into your chest, and then bring that leg out to the side. Lift your left knee up, and then get wide. Push your arms out as you dip the hip. Try it to the right knee, lifting to the side. And then step to the center, we go wide and lift to the side, floating for that quiet moment where we remember we're human, we let ourselves wobble and be imperfect. Remember your body's got you, you'll catch yourself, let that be a humbling moment. Woo! Remember the body is taking care of you rather than always the other way around. Go for 2 more. Woo! Back time here, bring the right knee into your chest. We gotta reach, right arm, right leg, reaches in diagonal. That left knee stays bent. Put all in, and reach it out, tap your mat. Like you're testing out the water, stay light on that toe. We go in reach, tap, and reach. So ultimately, we're adding some fire to that left glute, getting it nice and warm from all that seating. So let's go in, reach a little bit faster, maybe with a different arm, maybe disco arm, maybe you reach the arm. Let's go for 4, 3, 2, 1. Reach and stay, press a little deeper, play it out, groove it out. Bounce, 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 and get to the other side right away. Step, press wide, dip low, other leg. Left knee up, right away we go. Reach and pull, reach and pull. Right knee bent. Woo, maybe lower if you want a bit more warmth in that glute. Nice and light for your toe. Lift 3, spinning it up. Up. All right, end it in 4, 3, 2, hold that pose, that heels lifted. We bounce and groove. Who knew we would get that warm that fast, huh? Okay, my love, we're gonna add a bit more bouncing. Offer some love to the arms, the shoulders. Woo. Yes, the gyms are open today, so let's celebrate it. We're gonna take the heels in, toes turned out. Bounce center, lean to your left, tap your right toe. Ooh. Like you're springing yourself up, we go to the other side. Again, low, and tap, bounce, tap, bounce, tap, bounce, tap. Yeah. And like we did earlier, just let the arms get heavy for a moment as I process that new action. Getting low and getting long through the side. Tap, bounce, tap. All right, add the shoulders. We're gonna roll and roll it back. Up, back, up, back. Whoo. You don't want to hear me sing. I'll stop. Let's roll that shoulder even bigger, like you're shrugging something off today, shrugging off any tension that's built up from maybe tough conversations, too much thinking today. Take it off, free it off, and then turn it to an elbow. We're gonna bring that roll a little bigger. Elbow up and back, elbow up and back. Woo! Think about peeling a layer off. your way, really showing up today. Woo, in the truest you. Feel it up, and then we clear. Same leg, take the arms out to a T. We go down, reach, 2 big circles, bounce it up, tap, 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 tap. Woo. Okay, drop the arm, let him swing. Bounce, tap. I had a chance to get heavy here. Reconnect to your breath. Spine is nice and round. We're looking into the heart, hollowing out the spine. All right, keep the swing like your arms are branches of a tree. Keep the step tap, but just start to build your spine up back nice and tall. Back to more cathartic things here. See if you can toss the arm overhead, throw something out your mind. Throw. Woo. Yeah, thinking about opening through one side of the body at a time. Throw the arm, toss it over the ground, over the thoughts, your consciousness, and then find a twist. Arm goes across the body as you step tap. So as if your spine is a sponge and we're wringing it out. Bringing out any excess you can let go of for the rest of the day. Okie dokie. Same drop the arm, swing. Head heavy, round spine, bounce it out, bounce tap. Start to gradually lift your chest up, your spine tall. Keep the step tap. End it off with the shoulders, back to the top. Roll back. Shrug it off. Woo. Moving around the breath, moving around the emotions. Make it bigger, peel off that sweater, that layer, elbows wide. Finish off with the arms out wide. We go big circle, clear, some space, reach, drop the arm, swing. Bounce tap. Find your breath, build your spine tall, steady your feet, keep them heels in and toes out. We're nice and wide, sweep your arms up. Woo. Return to that right arm. Finding yourself expansive here. Let that right arm drop underneath your belly button. Reach your arms apart, finding that side stretch. Press into your feet. Let's let it take us up and over. Same stretch, other side. Woo. Pause here. Now keep your chest facing forward. And then just keep reaching that right arm more. Take it back behind you. And around, full circle. Sweep. A backstroke swim. Woo. Keep reaching the arm. Next time it circles up and over, let it take you back to that other side. Same stretch, other way. Reach the arms apart and pause. Woo. Pressing your feet, teeny lift here. Turn your torso back, facing the ceiling. Reach your right arm behind you. And then think about hinging at your hips. Lean more forward, lengthen the spine. Start to bend your back knee and fall all the way over onto the side. Or maybe drape the hands onto the mat, framing your foot. Extend your back leg. Heavy through the head as you bend that back knee again. Your heels still in, your toes still turned out. Last one. All right, pause. Let's turn our toes toward the right knee. Lower that back knee or stay lifted, your choice. Fight in your stance and sweep the arms all the way up overhead. Big clearing. Use your exhale to pull your elbows back. Finding your breath again. Use the whole inhale, reach. Exhale, pull back. Stepping your feet wider if you're feeling wobbly. Just one more. Taking care of you. Beautiful. Reach the arms forward. Let's pause. If your back knee is lowered, we'll all lift it here. Turn your heel in to touch the floor. Toes are turned out again. Bend both knees. And then just drag your arms across the space in front. Like if you were holding a big squeegee and you were cleaning a big window at every corner. Once more, other way. Drag the arms. Rounding spine, bending knees. Press into your feet, rise up to this big star shape. Extend your heart through the limbs. Inhale. Exhale, pours you down the right. And we find that familiar shape again. Reach the arms apart. Find that right rib cage open. Press into your feet, sweep up and over. Like we can open more space for that long pause here. Chest facing forward, take that top arm back behind you. Around. I wish I had movement breaks like this through every conference I ever go to. Sweep up and over. You're gonna see on the left. All right, attitude lift. Turn your torso back facing the side. Left arm and right arm reaching out position. Bend that back knee and lean forward. Drape yourself on the thigh or the floor. In that bend. And extend that back leg. Ooh, can you get even heavier through your head, softer through your neck as you let yourself melt into that stretch. Ooh, let's take one more for good measure. Using your inhale to deepen. Exhale to turn your toes to your left. Choose if you lower onto knee. Choose if you lift. Make sure your feet are wide apart though and you're not on a tightrope. Back heels lifted if you are lifted on the knee. Let's reach the arms. Inhale and rise up. Exhale, pull back. Clear the heart. Maybe softening eye gaze. Follow your breath here. Coat your whole body, your whole motion with the breath. Last one. Whoop. Finding your balance. Next time you reach up and forward, pause there. Turn your back heel inward, your toes are turned outward. Bend both knees, round your spine. Let's drag that squeegee across. And I know we're at 1 o'clock after this stretch. We'll just end in a nice slow breath. One last stretch for the legs. So trying not to rush into what's next, let's stay with what's here if you can. One more, sweet. Going in even slow motion, more slow motion. Drag it out, rinse through. Beautiful. As you turn to your left, let's just step to the back of our mat. And sweep the arms or the back of your space. Make sure there's space to fold forward, even if you're not on a mat. We're gonna dive into a forward fold, heavying the head, shaking out the skull. Place the hands on the shins. Inhale to lengthen the spine with your breath. And then exhale to fold all the way down. You can walk the hands to the top of your floor space underneath your shoulders and just reach your heels back into the sort of downward dog shape or your version of it. And take one breath just to reach the heels down and stretch back of legs. Beautiful. Use your exhale to lower onto 2 wide knees and take a seat onto the floor, onto a chair, whatever feels comfy for you, maybe even the couch. And then from here, we take the right hand and we'll try out a breath here. The thumb is going to cover your right nostril. We'll inhale through the left. Releasing just the pinky, everything else folded. The pinky closes the left. Exhale through your right nostril. Stay with your right nostril and inhale from there. Cover that nostril and exhale left. So we're alternating nostrils. Everywhere you exhale is your next inhale. So stay and breathe in. Exhale other nostril, breathe out. And if they aren't already, offering some softness through the eyelids. Your hand can hold the navel, can hold the heart, or just rest on your lap. We'll try a couple rounds like that just to rebalance ourselves. Recenter. The left side of the body, the left nostril, connects to our emotions, our empathy, our feeling. The right side under the eyebrows, everything down, connects to our logical brain, our doing, our learning. On a heavy information day like today, can we ask those two brains to be in relationship, especially work together in conversation, emotional wisdom feeding the ways we show up for one another, for ourselves, for community. Last few, see if you could lengthen them, your most expansive yet. If it feels okay, end this off looking in between your eyebrows, like you're looking up at your third eye with eyelids closed. Keep breathing. Finish off through left nostril, one slow breath in. Hold it at the top, looking to your third eye point, your place of intuition. Release your hand from face and keep holding, sipping in more air if you need to. Can you find tenderness rather than tension in that hold? Use your exhale to slowly relax and engage the shoulders, the eyes. And before jumping into what's next, take a moment to hold space for you. And whatever comes up, drop into the seat of a loving witness. Meet yourself here as curiously and compassionately as you can. Just observe. And take the hands to heart center. Let's rub our palms together. Your eyes can stay softened or closed. And we'll think about sealing in that quick mini practice. We can carry it for the rest of our day and week. So hold it here in your hands, rub a bit faster, apply a bit more pressure. Thinking about all the other beings sharing this moment with us. Let's take a collective breath in. Suspend your breath at the top, hold. Sending gratitude to every person here sharing space together. Use your exhale, pour that gratitude out as you separate palms just an inch. And feel that energetic charge, the subtleties of you, that tingling and warmth between your hands. May that tingling be a way to hold on to this experience the whole day, not just this practice. Honoring that the more we can show up for ourselves, the better we can show up for one another. Let's take our buzzing hands and place them over heart space. Squeeze the shoulders up to ears one last time. Slow breath in. Hold you in close. Exhale, roll shoulders back. Shine heart forward. And you're all done with me today. Thank you so much for trying that out with me in virtual land. I'm here in Toronto. If you ever want to try out a class with me, hit me up on Instagram. Thank you so much, YouthREX, for having me in New York. Katerina. Cheers, y'all. Enjoy your break and the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. This is me again.
Thank you so much. I had to get up off the floor, so I needed a minute. Thank you so much, Renelyn, and thank you for leading us into this break and to preparing us for what's to come this afternoon. I think we've shared some links, and you shared some links so folks can stay connected to you. Thank you. We really appreciate you sharing space with us, and thanks to everyone who participated and had this time to breathe and to connect to themselves. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
We are now officially going into our wellness break. We invite you all to take some more time away from your computers. If you have questions, please feel free to share them in the chat box. We look forward to coming back together again at 2 o'clock. Yeah, we look forward to this afternoon's program. Take care, everyone. Enjoy this time.